Hey everyone, I'm Matthew Francis and I'm going to teach you all about the best apples that you can use for baking. So before you can actually make any recipes that call for baking some apples, let's talk about the different types. There are so many varieties of apples, from Granny Smith to Golden Delicious to Honeycrisp to McIntosh. Really, there's hundreds of varieties of apples. Apples are really great for using in baking recipes, for salads, in savory meat dishes. There's really so many endless ways, both sweet and savory, that you can use your apples. But let's go through some of the actual names and varieties of apples there are out there. First, let's start off with the Braerburn apple. Braeburns have a sweet tart flavor with a texture that remains firm when it's baked. An all-purpose apple. It works well in pies and tarts where you don't want the filling to be overly juicy. Courtland apples are juicy and slightly tart with bright red skin and snowy white flesh. They are a terrific baking apple. Great apples for pies, cobblers, and crisps. When sliced, Courtlands are excellent for salads and cheese plates, as the flesh doesn't brown or discolor very quickly. Empire apples are a cross between McIntosh and Red Delicious. Firm textured and slightly sweet, slightly tart, the Empire is a fine, all-purpose apple good for juice, sauce, pies, baking, salads, eating fresh, and drying. The Fuji apple is firm, crisp, and juicy. Fuji apples are among the most popular apples for eating fresh, but they're also awesome for baking, as they hold their shape when they cook. Gala apples are a crisp, sweet apple with mild flavor. Galas have yellow-orange skin with red striping. They're among the best apples for applesauce, salads, eating out of hand, and pressing into cider. Golden Delicious apples are sweet with a rich, mellow flavor. It is one of the best all-around cooking apples, as it maintains its shape after cooking. Golden Delicious apples are really great for some savory recipes as well. Granny Smith is one of the most popular tart apples. Granny Smiths are crisp and quite sour. They're a good, all-purpose cooking apple, and their flavor is enhanced when paired with sweeter, spicier apples in pies and crisps. Gravenstein apples come in red and yellow varieties, with a sweet tart flavor and firm texture. They're excellent apples for eating fresh as well as baking, cooking down into applesauce, and pressing into cider. Honeycrisp apples are one of my favorites in flavor. They're developed in my home state here in Minnesota, and they're actually one of the more newer varieties of apple. Honeycrisps are fantastic eating apples. As the name indicates, they are crisp and juicy with a honey sweet and tart flavor. Honeycrisp apples are also good for baking and applesauce. Idared apples are a very old variety. Idareds have a tangy flavor and a flesh that is sometimes tinted and rosy pink. Idareds keep their shape while baking and are also excellent in salads. Jonathon apples are quite tart. With a rich, slightly spicy apple flavor, they hold their shape well when baked. They are good in salads and for applesauce. McIntosh apples are a classic bright red apple with green undertones. Juicy, crisp McIntoshes tend to break down when cooked. So when it comes to choosing the right apple for your recipe, whether you're baking or you're sauteing or you're eating them fresh in something like a salad, really no matter what recipe you're doing, any apple will work. Yes, some apples work better when they're baked or when they're fresh or when they're raw or when they're cooked, and you can research into all those different possibilities, but any apple will work for any recipe. So don't freak out too much if you have the wrong type. When it comes to baking, there are a few varieties that work really well, but what you want is an apple that will hold its shape well after it's cooked for a long period of time and won't become mushy. One of my favorite apples to use for baking is the Granny Smith apple. They're really great for baking because they hold their shape well and they're really tart. And that's helpful for when you make a dessert because oftentimes you're adding in more sugar or other sweet things, and having the tartness from the apples really kind of counteracts the sweetness and complements it really well. Also, when you cook something in the oven, things tend to soften, so if you have apples that get too mushy, that wouldn't be good. But Granny Smith apples hold their shape well. So when making an apple pie, the first thing you want to do is take off the peels of the apples. To peel your apples, you can use a sharp paring knife or an actual vegetable peeler, but regardless, as long as you get the apple peel off, you'll be good to go. Without their peels or their skins, apples tend to oxidize really quickly, so you want to make sure as soon as you peel your apples, you either chop them and use them right away, or you dip them into like a pool of acidulated water. Acidulated water basically just means some water that has some acid in it, so you can add either some lemon juice or some vinegar, and if you have that really acidic water and you put your fresh apples into it, all that acid in there will keep the apples from oxidizing and keep them from turning brown. So for making pies, first peel your apples, and then I like to cut down the sides of the core and make sure I slice those apple pieces into nice thin slices. Into a bowl, I'm going to add the apple slices as well as some sugar, some flour, and some spices like cinnamon and nutmeg and allspice. Then I'm going to take a wooden spoon and stir all these apple contents together. When you add sugar to any type of fruit, and you mix it around, what you're doing is a process called macerating that fruit. And what it does is all the hydrophilic pieces of sugar that are in your apples draw out all that moisture and all that water from the apples, and it allows them to soften up a bit and release all of their great juices. Next, I have some pie dough that has been pressed into a pie tin, and I'm going to put the apple filling inside. And I've just cut some strips of more pie dough to lace over the top. And then once I finish, I'm going to weave these pieces of pie dough together to make a lattice, just to give it a really great visual appeal. Once the lattice is finished, I'm going to make sure I press in all the edges of the pie together, crimping it all around the edges so that both the top and the bottom are sealed. I'll cut off any excess, and then we're basically done with making the pie itself, and we just have to prep it for the oven. So I'm going to take some egg wash and beat the egg and brush it over the top of the pie. This egg wash is going to give it a really beautiful golden brown color, and if you skip this step, I'm telling you, your pie will not look right, so make sure you definitely add an egg wash. Once the pie dough is fully covered with the egg, I'll take some great turbinado sugar, which is kind of like raw, kind of granular big sugar, and sprinkle it over the top. This also gives it a really great look, gives it a great texture later on when you enjoy it, and I just kind of like having that extra little crunch on top of the pie. And then into the oven it goes, and it's going to bake for about an hour at around 350 or so degrees, and then when it's done, I can enjoy it for dessert. So there you go, I've made you a beautiful apple pie and taught you a few things about apples and the best ones you can use for baking and for cooking. I hope you had some fun, hope you learned a few new things, and I hope you make some pie recipes of your own. Thank you for hanging out with me. If you enjoyed watching this video, please subscribe to Allrecipes. We make a ton of helpful videos that are going to be so useful for you in your kitchen. And don't forget to press the notification bell so you don't miss any of the great videos we do make. And down in the comment section below, tell me your favorite recipe that you use apples in. What is your favorite type? What's your favorite type of apple to enjoy? I'm curious, let me know. I'm Matthew Francis, and I'll see you next time.